giga forave. Iku bloj po rusula rusu. Holaka holala, halagu ku.
Howdy and hello, welcome back to Film And. It is a chilly, snowy evening in Burlington. Yes, the snow seems to have finally set in. I don't think I could have picked a more apt movie today to complement our dog and dreary surroundings here in Vermont. This week, we return with our running segment of This Week a Decade Ago, where we talk about a film that was released, yes, this week a decade ago, and talk about just how it was made, how it was received, and how it holds up today. The film I picked for this week is the 2011 film The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, based on the 2005 book by the same name. Not to tread on topical ground of to watch, to read, but I'll say this, I would be interested to see if Connor and Erica ever did an episode on this. If you don't know, the old host now has a podcast, To Watch, to Read, talking about film to book adaptations. Very interesting. It's on Spotify. Check it out. So essentially, Girl with the Dragon Tattoo is a neo-noir psychological thriller. And actually, this is a film directed by one David Fincher. And, by 2011, this would be actually the end of a pretty prolific streak for Fincher, it felt like. He had 4 movies that he directed, released within the span of 5 years, all kind of iconic and notable in their own way. You have 2007's Zodiac, 2008's Benjamin Button, 2010's The Social Network, and 2011's Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, which, we're talking about today. And when you put all those films together, and they're also very differently aestheticized films. I would say maybe Zodiac and Dragon Tattoo are the two that have the most, I think, thematic mystery connection. But when it comes to Fincher, I haven't seen all of his films, but I saw Seven, his 90s film, Brad Pitt, Morgan Freeman, this past winter. Fight Club, his probably most famous film. I saw it this summer. I saw Zodiac last fall, Social Network this spring, and then Mank last winter. So I've caught those. I've caught maybe 5 of his. And I have yet to see his debut, Alien 3. I haven't seen The Game, or Panic Room, or Benjamin Button, or Gone Girl. So with this movie, I'm about making it halfway through his filmography. And also, this is kind of a notable film because this is a screenplay written by Steven Zaillian, who is, oh my goodness, in my opinion, a ridiculously prolific writer. Some big credits you may know that maybe you don't know that he wrote. We're talking about Searching for Bobby Fischer, one of his earlier ones in the early 90s. A little movie called Schindler's List, which you might know, Spielberg, Clear and Present Danger, the original Mission Impossible, Gangs of New York, American Gangster, Moneyball, which was co-written by Aaron Sorkin, and The Irishman, 2019 film. So, some of the bigger Hollywood crime dramas of the past 30 years, as well as working with impressive directorial credits. So, a crossover of David Fincher with Steven Zaillian is bound to be an exciting matchup, especially with Fincher and Sorkin working together on The Social Network. So you have that, and then you have Zaillian and Sorkin co-writing on Moneyball, and now Fincher and Zaillian the next year, 2011, on Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. And, it's people just in these high places all converging and working on their projects together just in this very short amount of time, 2010, 2011. Another big film I'd love to mention, maybe not so big, but A Civil Action. Just caught that, also written by Steven Zaillian. Would recommend. So essentially, this film also stars kind of 2 big names. You have Daniel Craig as journalist Mikhail Blomkvist, and then Rooney Mara as Lisbeth Salander. And let's just give some context on these players. Daniel Craig, at this point, is having a huge 2011, starring in 4 arguably big films. And this is all before 2012, where he would star in his potentially most iconic film, Skyfall, which I feel like is revered by many to be the best Bond film, or at least the best Craig Bond film. But come on, Casino Royale, for me, that's still the best. It feels really untouchable, in my opinion. And this is, part of my inspiration to talk about Dragon Tattoo. Daniel Craig stars in 4 pretty high-profile films in 2011. Cowboys vs. Aliens, which is just a big blockbuster. Dreamhouse, which we talked about on the first episode of This Week, a decade ago this season. The Adventures of Tintin, another Spielberg film. And Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. Meanwhile, starring opposite, you have Rooney Mara, who, by the way, quick aside, I believe sister of Kate Mara, also an actress, which you can see in season 1 of American Horror Story, which I just watched. If anyone out there is a fan, I'm excited to continue beyond the first season. But Rooney Mara, I feel like, gets her big-ish breakthrough in basically working on 2 big films with David Fincher, Social Network and Dragon Tattoo. And she continues, to work on these films, and then I feel like that kind of sets up a pretty impressive resume on the past decade that Rooney Mara has kind of built up, working with these prolific directors. Spike Jonze's 2013 film Her, 2015 film Carol, the Leica Animation Studios, Cuba and the Two Strings, A24 film A Ghost Story, David Lowery, same director as The Green Knight, which came out this year, Terrence Malick's Song to Song, and also Gus Van Sant's Don't Worry, He Won't Get Far on Foot. And it all starts, I think, with her exposure working with David Fincher in the beginning of the 2010s. So you have just a lot of big players coming into this game, and it's honestly very exciting, to see this adaptation. What's going to happen? What's the screenplay going to look like? What's the direction going to look like? What's just the starring, the acting, everything. For me, this seems like a really exciting release, and I bet it was super exciting for everyone going into this, being like, oh, what's this movie going to be? If I can put myself in the shoes of someone walking into a theater in 2011, which I feel like I don't even know what I was seeing in 2011. I would be 11 or 12 or 10 or something. I'd be around that age. So I was not watching Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, thank goodness. But quick summary. Sweden, modern day. Daniel Craig's character, Mikael Blomkvist, is a journalist who's been publicly shamed for calling out a millionaire businessman for wrongdoing, but it's shown that he actually can't prove it, even though it is true. During this, Rooney Mara's character was spying on Daniel Craig to get information about him. She's this kind of prolific hacker. Essentially, when a meteor storm ruins Daniel Craig's reputation, Christopher Plummer's character invites Daniel Craig to his remote island home, which he shares with his traditional family to live there, as he tries to solve a 40-year-old murder of his family. And it kind of tells the story of Blomkvist's investigation to find out what happened to a girl from a wealthy family who disappeared 40 years prior. So this is kind of 1966. The movie takes place 40 years later. And he actually recruits the help of Rooney Mara's character, Lisbeth Salander, a computer hacker. So I watched the movie, and I'm going into the movie, I'm getting into it, and kind of like 10, 15 minutes in, it's just barreling down the screenplay like a train, scene after scene, lasting usually less than a minute, giving you everything you need to know very quickly. Like, this movie does not stop. It is exposition right when it needs to, and plot right when it needs to. And I feel like when I'm on the scene where they're driving to Christopher Plummer's character's Herr Wenger, that's where he lives, going to his house in the snowy north of Sweden. And, the fast pace that David Fincher is keeping the editing is almost dizzying. So I'm sitting here wondering, like, as they drive into Daniel Craig's first big plot point of the film, what is David Fincher saving up for? Because when I watch movies these days, sometimes I feel like you can tell that director and editor pace up other scenes, especially early ones, of backstory and exposition, so they have more time in the middle or end to show cool, weird, different stuff, or just to draw out other scenes. And that's what feels like is happening here, I mean, I'm waiting to see what David Fincher is brushing past or doing quickly so he can spend time on other sequences to really just kind of highlight and work as almost just memorable moments in this film. What does he want the audience to highlight, And there's also a point right here where I feel like there might be a twist at the end of this. And if so, is it a super obvious twist? Because I thought of this 10-15 minutes in. Because a theory popped into my head, and maybe I'll wait to share it just to see if I'm right by the end. And yeah, for a while, the film continues on these two main storylines, that of Mikhail, Daniel Craig, learning about the family, kind of investigating, and then Lisbeth, Rooney Mara's character, and her difficult life and background, which I will warn you now if you're interested in seeing this yourself. I mean, some of the things that are in this film are the most brutal scenes of sexual violence that I've seen in a while personally, and that came as a real surprise to me. It's a real contrast to the kind of the stark, cerebral, just family casual investigation that Daniel Craig is doing. It feels very tonally whiplashy. So just if you're going to go into this, you got to realize that there are some hard scenes to follow. So prepare yourself, I guess, for scenes of a sexual nature, which are quite not great. They're violent. And it does serve to, I think, show Rooney Mara's character in this specific light, very much often defined by her sexuality and how that sort of ties in with the plot line itself and the mystery they are investigating. But it's still pretty brutal, I'm not gonna paint over that at all. But, eventually their paths cross as Elizabeth, who was the one initially doing that background on Daniel Craig's character, is hired to team up with Daniel Craig as they find this 40-year-old killer. I do see Fincher kind of digging into his roots from Seven, the kind of Seven Deadly Sins horror movie he did in the 90s. And, and the mystery kind of unfolds similarly. And I can see that he is using some similar techniques to keep the audience at the edge of their seats. And is it as effective? Meh. Kind of. I mean, okay. I am intrigued, don't get me wrong, but this does feel like a more cerebral, emptier version of what Fincher was playing with on Seven. Except the unique aspects and world building kind of just aren't there. One of the things, I feel like Fincher is just one of those directors, at least in what I've seen with his fictionally based works, stuff like Seven and Fight Club. He's so good at creating an atmosphere that really feels like it's its own to that movie. He creates the universe of the movie that is rooted in modern society like our own, but almost exists in a different cinematic parallel universe, and Fincher does this often to advance the narrative for the better. And that's not to say I like these movies too much. I mean, Fight Club I found quite hard to enjoy, to be honest. And honestly, Seven may be one of my favorites of his, even when I have a couple issues with it. But whether I actually like these movies or not, one thing they do well is put you in the universe of the movie, and it's truly like nothing else. But here, there's this kind of realist, high quality, and brooding standoffishness with Dragon Tattoo that keeps me from really enjoying with it, really connecting with it. And the further I consider this movie, the further I think about its connections to the other category of films that Fincher tends to make that I've seen, dramatized recollections of real life events, i.e. Social Network and Zodiac. Two movies that chronicle somewhat true events and build off the source material to create a compelling story. And this mystery of looking into the past crimes is not particularly new to Fincher, since only 4 years earlier, Zodiac was released, and his telling of the Zodiac killer narrative feels like only a stone's throw away from a fictional story like this. And as you watch the movie, those connections become more and more apparent. So I feel like, in a way, even with Steve Zalien's writing, this kind of is coming together to be a culmination of a lot of different elements that Fincher has been playing with throughout his entire career, at least from what I've seen so far. Because this is the second most recent movie I've seen. Beyond this, I haven't seen Gone Girl, and the only most recent one I've seen is Mank. So this, for me, is a really just interesting culmination of everything he's been working on. And in this way, it does feel like a natural bookmark to these 4 strings of movies he made in those 5 years, starting with Zodiac and ending with this one. It makes me regret not watching Benjamin Button for this, as I'm just interested now in the creative progression that Fincher went through in those crazy couple years. And to be honest, I could talk about this movie for a while, but we're going to move on, and we're going to do a quick PSA break. But when we come back, I will continue to kind of unload my thoughts about Girl with the Dragon Tattoo.
Running late to class but still need that morning caffeine or hot breakfast to start your day out right? Download the Bite app by Sodexo and place your custom order for fast, easy pickup at Zyme. Open 8:30 a.m. to 3 o'clock p.m. Mondays through Fridays.
Indoor baseball, anyone?
Most party fouls are pretty dumb, but if you decide to drink and drive underage, you could lose your license and your freedom. Learn more at ultimatepartyfoul.org. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
All right, welcome back to Film and. You know what it is. We're talking about this week, a decade ago, December 2011, and Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. Continuing on through this movie, and the further and further I consider it, it strikes me as well that it seems that Steve Zaillian and David Fincher had a bunch of source material to work with, and he had to compress lots and lots and lots of plot information, mainly Daniel Craig and his investigation, into like quick montages of shots before any real dialogue can be justified. So it just comes off, honestly, as a very dense piece of cinema as well, for sure. And in interviews, they even mentioned this. The screenplay to adapt the book took about 6 months, and Zaillian would say the further into the process he'd go, the quicker the writing would become. Because as you had to make decisions, less and less things in the book would be put on the table that would make sense in the story. So the more things that got cut out, the less things you had to worry about writing. And things from the book would get much easier to cut once the main story of, the film version was sussed out. And, upon reaching the end of this process, Fincher himself said that he started working with Zaillian on a couple things, but really let him go on his own by the end of the process. And he mostly was interested in, the 320 pages Zaillian would end up cutting, which is, I guess, about how much he would have had to cut to kind of get it to be screenplay length. Which really just kind of goes to show you how much book is actually in this book. It's a lot of stuff. But, to bring it back to the movie, and, my theory that Fincher was saving up for something, I think it becomes more and more clear as I'm watching this. I'm starting to get to the end of the movie now, that he's just trying to fit as much story as he can. Because even for a film that's 2 hours and 30 minutes, he can't even fully tell a story like this. It really insists a lot on the audience, and you really have to pay attention to keep up with the many research montages that tell a good chunk of the story in between actual bits of dialogue. But again, I'll say this, and this is, a fair compliment, things never truly drag with this movie. It is always in motion, rushing to tell you all of the story you need as fast as it can. And back to the story, the mystery deepens as Craig and now Rooney Mara start to gain more and more access to not only the family company they started, but also historical documents and photos from the fateful day that Harriet, who's the victim, was killed in 1966. And, cracks begin to form, especially when Christopher Plummer's character becomes hospitalized after what I think is a stroke. And that really causes some tension in the family, but that kind of allows Daniel Craig and Rooney Mara to gain a bit more access, and they're even kind of further motivated to really figure out what happened to this poor girl. And definitely in Seven-esque fashion, all the murders, and it does become murders. They realize there's multiple deaths that they're dealing with now over multiple years, and it's this kind of thing where, medium spoilers, they're all kind of focused around biblical quotes from the Old Testament particularly, I think it's, what was it, Leviticus? So, that stuff's getting kind of weird. But yeah, I mean, if I can begin to get to the end of this film and sum up this film for all of you, there's a song from a band I like. It's called Sunglasses, and the band is called Black Country New Road. Came out with their debut record in early 2021. And the opening line of the song is, "Welcome to the best new six-part Danish crime drama." And I don't know, but that line had been in my head all year. And I can't help but feel that this rings very true for Dragon Tattoo, as this feels like a six-part Scandinavian crime drama, kind of just written as a full-length feature film. And I'll get into that more into a minute, but some more context on the film itself when it was coming out. I was surprised to hear that this was a box office hit. I mean, not obviously a hit in the way of like true money returns, because it only made about double what it cost MGM to produce, which sounds like a lot. But for a lot of studios, success is often considered like 2 times what you actually put into it, The film did well. I mean, it grossed over $232 million and, being received really well by critics. But then, I realized that true, and this was kind of a suspicion I had, that over half of the profit, roughly $130 million of that 232, was indeed from international box office sales, which makes way more sense in my opinion. Because this film just feels like a more internationally palatable type of film, and I could see it doing less well in the States, considering what it seems America is usually drawn to theaters for. But, I mean, go back to 2011. You gotta imagine, from the director of Fight Club and Seven, definitely helped with this, and, promoting this film. Some other thoughts, maybe one of the best uses of Enya's Orinoco flow, perhaps, quite a fun juxtaposition from the scene it's laid over. If you watch this, you'll see it, and you will be pretty amazed, somewhat shocked to hear that song over what's happening. Overall, I gotta say, not a bad film, Getting to the ending and kind of letting it sit in for a bit, it's not a terrible film. I was intrigued by it. I loved analyzing it. The twist that I thought was a twist wasn't the twist, so I'll keep that one to myself. That'll be locked in the film and safe, I guess, for all eternity. The ending is kind of a cool resolution, much more peaceful and dialogue-driven than I thought it might have been, but that kind of works in the theme of a Steve Zalian screenplay, so I feel like I should have seen that coming. Though the ending of, the main story kind of really wraps up early on, and the movie tends to drag a bit on what feels like almost useless character plot and development, and by this point it feels like the audience is kind of clocked out. You've told us the main story, you can move on, just we'll come back for the next one, I guess. And I do believe there is another movie gets made that is part of this greater universe. But more to the final question, how has this film held up? It's 2021, it's been a decade, and we've gotten 2 David Fincher films after this. We've seen Daniel Craig go on to continue to be James Bond and even become another iconic character in Knives Out as the protagonist. And then you also have Rooney Mara, a decade of pretty successful alternative film, So, in the decades since, you can look at what everyone has gone to do, and, this was an interesting film, somewhat middling, but, at the end of the day, I feel like it has interesting intentions and somewhat poor execution. Gone Girl, I can't say much for, but I remember that also being a huge film when I came out, moving on from Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, which I think shocked a lot of audiences for its very brash and revealing nature. Moving on to Gone Girl, I remember this also being a popular film. And what's funny is, I knew nothing about it, but I heard it everywhere. And it was also one of the first films I recall being advertised incessantly on banner ads on the internet. Just random website having a banner ad for David Fincher's Gone Girl. And I don't know why that sticks in my head, but I find that interesting that, a film as somewhat out there as Dragon Tattoo didn't really falter Fincher's career at all. At this point, why would it? You know, I think he was in a place where that really wouldn't get to him, I guess. But yeah, you know, it's a fine and interesting but somewhat dulled psychological thriller that is dense and intriguing, but does little to truly bring the viewer into any universe other than our own. And, you know, the lack of grittiness, I guess, holds the film back greatly. I mean, the things I've enjoyed about every previous Fincher film was that its grittiness. There's this sort of sleek, high frame rate European miniseries vibe to this film that I think honestly makes it suffer. Though I can't help but think that this was the perfect aesthetic to tell this story. So at the end of the day, that feels like a personal opinion, and this film might really just not be for me aesthetically. Because I look at the 2005, like, Scandinavian book adaptation, and I'm like, yeah, I think Fincher looked at what was coming out of that film community, out of that television community, and kind of followed suit and was really just bringing this aesthetic not just to the world, but to America and to his film, his interpretation of the book with Steve Zaillian. And I guess that just makes sense. You know, I can respect that without really sinking my teeth deep and like enjoying it, you know? So I guess those are overall my thoughts on Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. A very interesting selection, a very interesting chapter to put back on the bookshelf for this week a decade ago. I do hope to continue doing these when I can. You know, obviously we're about to get to the end of the season. I only have an episode or two left. I'm not sure which one will be my last one, but I'm hoping to get at least 2 more episodes in. But yeah, you know, I have a couple more planned for next season, which I'm excited about, and I think it's a very interesting retrospective to do, to look 10 years back, because if you consider what life was like in 2011, what the world of cinema was like in 2011, it was a different place. It really was. I mean, a lot has changed in a decade, and not just, you know, in the greater societal context, but in like the context of film and Hollywood and what was coming out and what was huge and who was in stuff. It was a really interesting time. And I do feel like in many ways, going back to Steve Zaillian and Aaron Sorkin and David Fincher, this kind of era, 2010, 2011, really feels like the last time in any of those 3 people's careers where they were really at the top of their game. Maybe not with quality, because obviously, you know, it's kind of subjective, but also just the idea of popularity, influence. You know, Moneyball and The Social Network and Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. Those feel like some of the biggest collaborations of all those individuals, director and writer. And Girl with the Dragon Tattoo kind of feels like that final chapter. That's kind of the last one we got with everyone together. And I just think that's kind of an interesting thing. Just kind of going to see what everyone else would go to work on in the following decade. This does feel like kind of this final film that captured some of these similar creative progressions that we had from the late 2000s going into 2011. So, I guess that's it. That's all I got. Thank you so much for listening, as always. This will end up on the Letterboxd film and list. All the movies we talk about are on there. And of course, all the movies we talk about from the first 4 seasons of Film and are on Connor's Letterboxd at Cranberry18. That is CRAND Berry 18. And you can find my list at DA_N. You'll be hearing from me next week with another concept of something. We'll see what it is. But, you know, until then, have a lovely rest of your week, and you'll hear from me soon.